What would you do if you heard a foghorn from a lighthouse that had been abandoned for 50 years? Would you ignore it or investigate? This is the story of Emma Clarke, a marine biologist who answered that call in the summer of 1996. A story documented by Coast Guard logs and sealed for decades. A story about duty that transcends death itself and the price one man paid to keep his promise. Cape Meridian, Maine coast, July 1996. Emma Clarke had come to study gray seal populations along the rocky shores, setting up camp in a weathered cottage 3 miles from the old Keeper's Point Lighthouse. The lighthouse had been decommissioned in 1947. Automated systems replaced it. The keeper's cottage boarded up, left to the elements. Everyone said the light tower was unstable, dangerous, off limits. But on her 3rd night, Emma woke to a sound that shouldn't exist. The deep, mournful wail of a foghorn cutting through the darkness. One long blast. Pause. Too short. Pause. Repeat. She stepped outside. The beam from Keeper's Point swept across the water. Bright, deliberate, impossibly alive. Through her binoculars, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure moving inside the lamp room, methodical, purposeful, as if conducting routine maintenance. The lighthouse had no power, no keeper, no reason to operate. Yet there it was, calling across the water like it had for 100 years before silence claimed it. Morning light revealed nothing. No tracks in the sand leading to the lighthouse. No boat anchored nearby. No signs of human presence at all. Emma contacted the local harbor master, Samuel Redding, a man in his 70s who'd spent his entire life on these waters. When she described what she'd seen, his face went pale. July 15th, he whispered. Same date, every year. You're the first outsider to witness it in decades. He told her about Thomas Ainsworth, the last keeper of Keeper's Point. A veteran of the Great War, Thomas had manned the lighthouse for 23 years, never missing a single night. He lived alone with his golden retriever Beacon, rotating the massive Fresnel lens by hand, keeping meticulous logs of every vessel that passed. On July 15th, 1947, a Category 3 hurricane struck without warning. Modern forecasting didn't exist. Ships had no advance notice. Thomas could have evacuated. Coast Guard sent a boat, but he refused. There are 17 fishing boats out there, he radioed back. If that light goes dark, they'll crash on the rocks. I'm staying. He kept the light burning through 18 hours of hell. Winds clocked at 130 miles per hour. Waves shattered the keeper's cottage. But the light stayed on, sweeping the darkness, guiding vessel after vessel to safety. At dawn, when the storm cleared, Coast Guard arrived to find the lighthouse intact and operational. Thomas was slumped over the rotation mechanism, his hand still gripping the crank. Dead from exhaustion and a massive heart attack. Beacon lay beside him, refusing to leave his master's side. Every boat made it home. 17 crews, 63 men. They found his final log entry. Samuel said quietly, just 3 words. Promise kept. Forever. Emma couldn't shake the story. That night, when the foghorn sounded again, she grabbed her flashlight, climbed into her kayak, and paddled toward Keeper's Point. The light beam swept overhead as she approached. The brass horn blared its pattern, one long, two short. The international distress signal, but reversed, not calling for help, but offering it. She climbed the rusted ladder bolted to the rocks, pushed through the rotting door, and ascended the spiral staircase. Each step groaned under her weight. Salt air and decay filled her lungs. At the top, in the lamp room, The massive Fresnel lens rotated smoothly, impossible without electricity. And there, standing at the control panel, was a figure. Not solid, not quite transparent, like heat shimmer off summer pavement. The shape of a man in a keeper's uniform, turning the manual crank with practiced precision. Emma's flashlight beam passed through him. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her. Just kept working, methodical and calm, consulting a logbook that sat open on a desk that shouldn't exist. She edged closer and saw the pages, filled with dates, times, weather conditions, ship names and positions. The last entry, tonight, July 15th, 1996. Vessels at risk, the Mariner's Daughter, Catch of the Day, Northern Star, storm approaching, unexpected, severe. Emma's radio crackled to life on her belt. Static, then a frantic voice. Coast Guard, this is Northern Star. We're taking on water. Visibility 0. We can't see. Wait, there's a light. Thank God, there's the lighthouse at Keeper's Point. We're making for shore. She looked at the figure. For the first time, he turned his head toward her. His face was weathered, kind, exhausted. The face of a man who'd kept his promise every night for 50 years beyond death. You can rest now, Emma whispered. They have GPS radar, modern systems. You don't have to stay. The keeper's ghost smiled, sad, knowing. He shook his head slowly, then pointed to the logbook, to a line she hadn't noticed. July 16th, 2003. Small craft, no radio, storm, critical. 7 years in the future, already written. You see them all, Emma breathed. Every storm, every boat in danger, past and future. He nodded once, then returned to his work. The light kept turning. The horn kept calling. Emma descended the lighthouse in a daze. 3 boats made it safely to harbor that night, guided by a light that officially didn't exist. She spent the next week researching records at the Maritime Museum. Every July 15th since 1947, inexplicable rescues occurred near Keeper's Point. Boats lost in fog, sudden squalls, equipment failures, all guided to safety by a lighthouse beam that Coast Guard insisted was inactive. 73 documented cases, hundreds of lives saved. But Emma found something else. Photographs of Thomas Ainsworth. In every picture from his last 5 years as keeper, his eyes held the same exhaustion she'd seen in the ghost. The weight of knowledge, of seeing disasters before they happened. She returned to the lighthouse one final time, bringing something she'd found in the museum archives. Beacon's collar, preserved and donated by Thomas's nephew. She climbed the tower at sunset. The keeper was there, as always, preparing the night's watch. She placed the collar on the control panel. The ghost stopped. Slowly, so slowly, he reached toward it, and for one moment, his translucent hand became solid enough to touch the worn leather. A single tear tracked down his weathered face. Then he straightened, returned to his post, and adjusted the lens for optimal focus. Emma understood. He would never leave. This was his purpose, his promise, his choice. Some debts are paid forever. Coast Guard officially investigated the persistent reports of unauthorized light activity at Keeper's Point in 1998. Their team found the lighthouse structurally unsound, the lens system corroded beyond function, and no evidence of power source. Yet their own report noted, during inspection, observed unexplained light emission from lamp room. Duration, 4 seconds. Cause, undetermined. The lighthouse was condemned and scheduled for demolition. The night before the work was to begin, Every construction vehicle broke down simultaneously. Unexplained mechanical failures. The project was canceled. Emma continued her research summers at Cape Meridian for 12 more years. Every July 15th, the light turned, the horn sounded, and somewhere on those dark waters, sailors who would never know how close they came to disaster made it safely home. In 2008, she published her findings in a maritime journal, carefully avoiding any mention of ghosts. She called it atmospheric phenomenon and unexplained electromagnetic activity. The Coast Guard filed it away, content to leave the mystery unsolved. But local fishermen know. They still consult their grandfather's charts, which mark Keeper's Point with a single notation: trust the old light. Always. Emma returned to Cape Meridian in July 2015 for what she knew would be her last visit. At 73, climbing Lighthouse stairs wasn't wise, but she had to see him once more. The keeper was there, unchanged, eternal, still turning his watch, still consulting his impossible logbook, still keeping his promise. She left a photograph on the control panel, the 17 fishing crews from 1947 standing together on the dock the morning after the hurricane. Smiling, alive, saved. When she looked back from the doorway, the keeper held the photograph in both hands, solid hands, for just a moment. He nodded to her, the gesture of one guardian to another. Then he returned to his eternal vigil. The light still turns at Keeper's Point. No power source, no logical explanation. Just one man's. Promise, kept long after death claimed his body, but couldn't break his will. Some stories challenge what we think we know about death, about duty, about the strength of a promise kept. In a world obsessed with moving forward, maybe we need reminders that some bonds don't break, some lights don't fade. Thomas Ainsworth died at his post in 1947. But every sailor guided safely past those rocks proves that dedication doesn't end with a heartbeat. True guardians never abandon their watch. This is the story of the keeper's last signal, a man who chose duty over rest, and found that some promises are strong enough to transcend death itself.